Sometimes it takes going through something to become passionate about something, especially when you come out the other side. It's important to point out here that people are getting sicker and sicker, younger and younger. And I talked to my dad, for example. He's like, Matt, when I was 40, there was nothing wrong with me. You know what I mean? And that I don't see to be the case anymore. The problem is that we're assaulted on all angles, right? We live in a toxic soup. We are chronically avoiding sunlight and nature. And most importantly, we are not eating foods that are appropriate for our physiology. And imagine being able to trust your hunger and lose weight, right? I think your food needs to make sense to you. And that's why one of my pillars is education. A lot of people don't realize the power that can play, especially as you're healing. I think your birthright is your health. No one can tell you what diet's gonna make you live longer, but your health today is gonna be a major indicator of your health tomorrow.
All right, all of my carnivore family community out there, we have the marvelous Matt Helfer here. He's a metabolic health coach and founder of Metabolic Mojo. After healing himself from debilitating pain and fatigue, Matt developed a 90-day coaching model focused on mitochondrial vitality, mindset shifts, and root cause recovery. He now guides others to reclaim their energy, clarity, and metabolic mojo through science-backed lifestyle change. Matt, my brother, how you doing, and welcome.
Dr. Kiltz, I'm doing fantastic. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on. I love long form conversations like this. It's such a joy. And, you know, as someone who loves to listen to long form conversation, I think it can be a treat for the audience. They really get to dive in with us. So very fun, very excited to be here.
Well, I'm primarily carnivore, but I think want to make sure that we soften and include everyone in this story of ketogenic and or carnivore as a way of living. And technically, you could do ketogenic as a vegetarian, a Mediterranean, a pescatarian, a carnivore, even a vegan could join in in this lifestyle of living and healing. Love to hear first your own journey to the carnivore diet and how this has affected your life.
Yeah, I'd be happy to unpack that. So, you know, for a lot of my career, I was actually a professional actor. You know, I did a lot of musical theater. I was a theater English double major. So I come to this with a bit of a different lens, mainly because, and you might have sussed this out with many of the people you have conversations with, but sometimes it takes going through something to become passionate about something, especially when you come out the other side. That was indeed the case for me. So a little bit of backstory. I just finished one of my favorite roles. I was playing Danny Zuko at the Winter Garden Theater in Toronto. And I was one of two Americans that were flown out and you're housed and you're super pumped. And that's really when my body began to fail. Now, a couple things I want to unpack about when I started feeling that. My back was the main focus. I had debilitating back pain when I got back to New York. I could barely get out of bed for a year and I developed chronic Achilles tendonitis. So in a walking city, it was kind of the worst, you know, of both worlds. Your back hurts, hard to get up and move. And then your ankles and your Achilles are just wrecked. And so, you know, when you have to carry groceries back from the store, it's not a great place to be riddled with that. Luckily, my now wife, then girlfriend, and followed by fiance, she was a godsend in that realm. She kind of really helped me through it. And I did the standard quo. I had to do physical therapy. You know, I got all the scans and nothing was helping. In fact, it just kept getting worse and worse. I would do the PT, worse, which is not a knock on PT, but what it was a wake-up call to inflammation for me. And so I figured there had to be something that I could do. I just needed, after being in this super dark place, to find some ownership over this situation. I wanted to find a way, if I could, to take something into my own hands. And that, to me, was how I was led to nutrition. So I actually did the carnivore diet sort of out of desperation. And to kind of wind the clock, I'm going on my 7th year in June. So, you know, I'm not a short-term carnivore. And my wife did it with me. Accountability is key. And having someone to do this with you is something I'm sure we'll come back to.
All right. If you're not a member of the Mighty Tribe yet, you must, right? Just go to Kiltz's Mighty Tribe and become a member. It's free. The whole intention is to bring the community of all humans to learn why this is better than this. And we invite all vegans and vegetarians, Mediterraneans, and carnivorians to Kiltz's Mighty Tribe. It's a meetup. It's a place to learn while you've been suffering likely from this, and you'll feel better on this. But what are the nuances of what you can do to feel better, look better, and live better? Because I've done it. And that's why I created the Mighty Tribe, to bring you into the masterclass. Be the master, my friends, and join Kiltz's Mighty Tribe. God bless. Can you share your age and your age you began to start feeling symptoms? Because I think that's really important, because everyone needs to know where they're at, where you're at, and what type of things are happening, even at your young age.
Yeah. I appreciate you calling me young. I'm 35 years old now. And I want to say, in fairness, I lived a very active lifestyle, right? So I was dancing and singing on stage. You know, you're touring, so you're sitting on tour buses, and your body kind of suffers in that regard as well. But I also played a lot of sports. So I've fractured my L5 vertebrae. I've herniated a disc. I've torn my groin. I've kind of been through the ringer in that way. But when I really started to get the inflammation was when I was in my mid 20s. So about 25. And, you know, it's important to point out here that people are getting sicker and sicker, younger and younger. That's what I'm finding with the people that I work with, and also what we're seeing at large in the communities around us. And so it's what used to be maybe uncommon. When I talk to my parents, and I talk to my dad, for example, he's like, Matt, when I was 40, there was nothing wrong with me. You know what I mean? And that I don't see to be the case anymore. One interesting thing about my inflammation was that it was so bad that I couldn't even heal from rolling out and doing myofascial release. So when my back was really bad, I would, you know, take a lacrosse ball and try to do myofascial release down the spine and on the lats. And what ended up happening is I couldn't even heal out that micro damage. And so I have hyperpigmentation, and I'll show you one day when we meet up in person, but down my spine, I actually have darker circles from that lacrosse ball. And when my body finally was able to heal, I still have the pigmentation change, but it was going down this anti-inflammation rabbit hole that literally gave me my life back. So to kind of fast forward to now, when you get out of chronic pain and you get your life back, a lot of people, first of all, you have a lot of gratitude that you may not have been blessed to really appreciate prior to a health condition. But also it made me hyper passionate. I became a research nerd. I became the guy that could spend 8 hours learning and researching and trying to understand. And, you know, for me, from an inflammatory perspective, that led me down the chronic disease pathway of wanting to understand how all these things unfold that we're so riddled with is in this chronic pandemic, really, of health. And so when my wife and I made the big decision to, you know, just leave the major cities, because in fairness, nothing against New York, I hated it. Now, I'm from Boston. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan, so maybe I'm holding it against the Yankees. But I will tell you, yeah, there you go, Dodgers, Warriors. But I will say we made the choice to ask ourselves the question, what would it look like if we lived in a place we loved? And I do talk a lot in my work about lifestyle and about, you know, reframing the mind. And for us, that was to move back to where we met, which was in St. George, Utah. Little town in southern Utah. There's a big outdoor amphitheater. My wife and I met performing there together. She's a professional dancer, so an extremely high-end athlete. I was like a singer actor in the shows, and we fell in love out here 8 years ago. And we took the chance to just move to a small town where nature really calls to you. And it was a major change for us, and it was spectacular. I cannot tell you all the wonderful things that have happened since, but that's what made me want to go full time. I figured, I think this is the moment. I think this is what God's calling me to do. I feel more passionate about this than anything. And so that was sort of the big change. And that's when I started the Metabolic Mojo, and I've been doing it ever since.
What are your thoughts on your background in acting? And really, you're now a commentator, you're a teacher, and how your English degree and your dancing and acting starts helping you share the story in a way that maybe is different than others.
That's a great question. It's one that I've thought about a lot, actually. You know, I think about everybody has certain gifts that they're called to share. And when I look back on my career in acting, my brother, who's an anesthesiologist, he always says, Matt, you should have gone to med school. Like, you should go back. You should go back. And I feel like I was really blessed with an opportunity to hone the skills that I have that really make me a better coach now. For one, part of what acting calls you to do is really step into other people's shoes, really take the human experience from a point of empathy and understanding. But in addition, it really hones your communication skills. When I was living in LA for 5 years, pursuing more TV and film, I mean, I was taking improv classes all the time. It's funny when I talk to young men who are like, "How do you talk to girls?" I'm like, "Go take an improv class." You really just hone in on talking and connecting with people. And so I feel very thankful. I'm not. I have no qualms about having now fallen in love with a new passion and a new career, but having lived one that was a really robust experience. I mean, I got to see the whole country. I've been to almost all 50 states, touring Mamma Mia the musical. I've done so much Dancing Queen, Dr. Kiltz, I'll tell you, and I still love it. But yeah, so I think being able to connect with people, being able to be clear and concise with your words, understanding, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Everybody comes at, chronic disease does not really discriminate. It doesn't care who you are. And so you work with a very wide range of people with a very wide range of beliefs across the board, across the political spectrum. You work with people across whether they're into holistic nutrition, whether they're against it off the bat. I mean, you work with lots of different people. And so I think it's really important to be able to find a way to connect and to communicate effectively. So that's kind of how I'm quite thankful for my experience, having been a professional actor for a long time. That's one unique element.
What's your sense as the cause of disease for all of us, and how do you approach your clients in understanding exactly why and which way to go?
Yeah, this is critical. I call it the slings and arrows of modern society. It's a little Shakespearean term for you. But the problem is that we're assaulted on all angles, right? We live in a toxic soup. We are chronically avoiding sunlight and nature. We're not participating in nature as our biology is designed. And most importantly, we are not eating foods that are appropriate for our physiology. We are inside all the time. Everybody is stressed out and scrolling on social media and just wrecking their dopamine and their feel-good chemicals. Our microbiomes are completely wrecked at large. And then we also have a huge focus on pharmaceutical as the saving grace. And I don't think that we should completely eschew, this modern medicine. I've talked to you before about how incredible emergency care is, how life-saving it is, but we just chase symptoms. And when we do the deep dive, it can be very powerful how tied together root cause healing can be from a nutritional paradigm. So I like people to you kind of want to throw everything you got at it. Nutrition can play a massive role, but so can social interaction, getting outside of isolation. So can, our feel-good chemicals, our oxytocin and our vasopressin for men and women. I mean, our bonding chemicals require human interaction, right? And so sunlight, getting out in nature, there are so many things that we can do, so many levers we can pull, that I like to say the place to start is with nutrition, mainly because I think that's the fastest and robust lever that we can pull. I think bringing our insulin down, getting off of the blood sugar roller coaster, prioritizing fat soluble vitamins and amino acids and minerals is really the fastest way forward. But I do find that for most people, they need all of it, as we all do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the activity you live through as an athlete, essentially, everyone's got to exercise and over exercise. And I knew I used to do 5 to 15 miles easily every 3 to 5 days, plus a 100-mile bike ride every weekend. And my body was falling apart.
Yeah. Well, the big issue there I find is that we don't take the time to recover. I'm quite pro exercise, but I'm quite pro with the understanding that muscle mass, which is a metabolic sink, which I'm sure you've shared on the show before, as we age really does contribute to longevity. I mean, we want to be functional. And I think being functional is very different than being a bodybuilder, right? and chasing these aesthetics that, our pop culture really throws at men and women, right? Lifting weights, especially for men, can be very powerful for hormones. It can be very powerful for our testosterone and our vasopressin, right? Our chemical bonding hormones. And so, myself, I think it's important to share that with all the injuries that I've had, I do very functional workouts. I just had a workout today where I was just doing some sled pulling. I was doing some spine alignment. I was doing some core through walking motions. And these are things that aren't sexy. I mean, I have a very dear friend of mine who's I call him Big Mike. He's 285 pounds of just muscle. And Big Mike is lifting heavy. And he looks over at me and I'm like, dude, you're bench pressing, you're shoulder pressing me right now, And yet, he is the first to say to me, man, my back is fried. I'm not recovering well. And so when we have conversations, it's all about how do we move your exercise ideology over to something that can be quite functional and offer lots of longevity. Marathon running. I mean, we have marathon runners that drop dead of heart attacks in their 50s and 40s. I mean, it is a stress. And I think it's critical for people to understand that if you are going to exercise, which I firmly think is important, it's important to recover. And we recover with nutrition, and we cover via our social interactions. We recover by bringing our stress down and getting in the sun, getting our nitric oxide in our blood flow. So, yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the nutrition plan that you talk about and you recommend. And is it different for different people?
It's a great question because it can be. I think depending on how sick you are and how specifically sick you are, there can be nuance for sure. I find that the three pillars that are most powerful, and this is why carnivore is usually my first option, okay, is because we need to prioritize bioavailable nutrition. Number one, we have to get the fat soluble vitamins. We have to get the amino acids. But equally as important is we have to do that in a way that is not bringing in too many anti-nutrients, that's not going to be preventing us from absorbing these important nutrients, and also is going to bring insulin down. The problem that we have today is people are chronically eating ultra processed food. And so when they do that, they're riding this insulin roller coaster. And there's a reason why diabetes and prediabetes and PCOS and obesity and all chronic fatigue are through the roof. People have never tapped in to the hybrid engine of our metabolism, to that other side, which is fat metabolism. And I believe quite strongly that fat metabolism is our designed fuel. And so we have to make the fuel swap first. We have lots of tools at our disposal, Doc. And, one of them is fasting, right? But I don't start there, believe it or not. I like to get people very fat adapted first, very deeply entrenched in understanding how the nutrition plays such a critical role in healing. And then we have tools. Then we can play around with fasting, right? Whether it's intermittent or 1 day, 2 day. I believe he did like a 15-day fast,
Yeah,
which I'm
it's crazy.
fascinated to hear all about. And so we have lots of tools at our disposal. But I find that pulling the lever of insulin, bringing that down, providing the fat soluble vitamins, the amino acids, and the minerals, and then finding accountability and lifestyle change, which I do focus a decent amount on with my clients, which would be participation in nature, it would be movement, and the like, and trying to get toxins out of our environment. But that's a bit more nuanced.
Well, tell me a little bit about, what's your day-to-day diet?
Yeah. It changes. My wife does this with me. And so, and she's also pregnant right now, which is very, very exciting.
We'll talk
and
more
so
about
that's
that.
always, yeah, I'm sure we will. Yeah, for sure. So for me, I'm a huge fan of eggs, big fan of steaks, big fan of burgers. It's very easy to get a lot of fat in this 80-20 ground beef, which is very, very cheap and very affordable for many. And so that's sort of the way we go. And I, believe it or not, I'm a big fan of dairy. I love dairy. Dairy is a nuanced conversation, however, because many people can be intolerant, especially most humans are, to the A1 casein, which would be the lectin in the A1 cows. However, A2 dairy is a much better way to go. It's much more tolerated. And so that can be very nuanced. I do see some clients where dairy can actually be a hindrance. It could be a plateau breaker for many when they stall on weight loss. And for others, it's just not as tolerated. For me, I'm Irish by descent. The Irish are pretty much the most tolerant dairy population on the planet. And so I find that dairy works very, very well for me, and I really do enjoy it. But so yeah, so butter, steaks, eggs, chicken thighs. I'm a big fan of pork, believe it or not. Some people eschew pork. However, I find that the B1 in pork is just you really can't get it in that quantity anywhere else. And so I like to trust my appetite. I really go, what am I in the mood for today? And you'll probably know this, but the longer you've done it, the easier it is to be a creature of habit. And I think it's important for people to realize that when we think about ancestral diets in general, when we think about how we lived really prior to some chronic diseases and some of the tribes that still do this, they really don't eat a lot of different foods. I mean, really, they'll eat, 4 to 15 max in some of these tribes. And so many people find once they go carnivore and they can understand and wrap their mind around the healing and the nutrition and the paradigm, you really don't gravitate to too much. You don't get tempted by variety like you used to. And when people do start, that's a challenge, right? They want the crunch. A lot of people want that little sweet or that salt or the tang. And so, and the mixture of them all. And so that can be a balancing act at the beginning, but I find that I keep things very simple for myself, and I enjoy that. It kind of takes the stress out of food in general, moves me to life and people.
And one meal a day, 2 meals a day, a snack or two.
I do it based on how I feel. And, again, I've done this for so long that, there is a goal orientation that can be appropriate here. If somebody's really adamant on losing weight, we can modify. Today, I'll give you another example. I wanted to be very clear. I want to be clear headed. I want to be focused. I want to have an exciting conversation. I haven't eaten today, right? I find that when I fast, I get very focused, very clear. I have a lot of mental clarity. I have not eaten today. Now, that's not because I'm chasing some health goal for me. It was just because that's how I felt today and how I wanted to feel when I'm having this conversation with you. And so today will be a one meal a day, but I would say my average is two. And actually, for most of my clients, the average would be 2 meals a day. Yeah.
And how about fasting? Do you utilize that with your clients, yourself?
Absolutely. So I always recommend intermittent fasting. What's amazing about the carnivore diet or a properly formulated animal-based ketogenic diet, of course, as you mentioned, you can do a ketogenic diet in varying ways, but when we do an animal-based ketogenic diet, the benefit is coming from all of these vitamins and minerals that we get from the animal food, and we stimulate satiety really, really well. So the goal is for people to be able to trust their hunger, and imagine being able to trust your hunger and lose weight, right? There's nothing worse than going on a calorie deficit diet, but looking at a donut and wanting to just absolutely rip it apart because it looks so good. Then you're relying on willpower. And what's fantastic about a carnivore diet is it very quickly takes willpower out of the equation because you become so well satiated from a hormonal standpoint, all of these satiety hormones. And also, as you're starting to lose weight, we're getting a better leptin processing, or our leptin signaling is getting better, and our GLP-1's getting better. Everything is getting better. And so people can actually start to trust their hunger. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't use fasting or some minor caloric deficits in moments of plateaus or people with very specific goals, but I use it as a tool. And I just like to tell people, as I found myself, it is so empowering to have the freedom where you can trust your appetite and be healthy. That's a rare thing today, isn't it?
Although it's our biggest challenge. And I wonder if one of the biggest problems is that we're just in an environment of excessive food availability. And so instinctually, when food was available, you took every opportunity to eat as much as you can because the only place for food is on your belly is fat.
Well, yes, and it's a critical function in the human body. It's actually very relevant ancestrally, right? The addiction pathways, especially when it comes to food, are important from our history. When we had access to lots of berries and lots of nuts, in the autumn, we were fattening up for winter. And what a lot of people don't realize is that fat on our bodies, our adiposity, our adipose tissue, is stored calories. It is a buffer against scarcity down the road. Right. And so now in our modern environment, when we have refrigerators and we have grocery stores you can walk to and you can order direct from Amazon, we're not in that category anymore. We don't live in that way. And so these addictive pathways, we are Oh, there's a way you could say it is we're eating for winter all the time when we are combining our fats and our carbohydrates together. And just separating people from that can give them a nice anthropological lens that makes sense to them. And I think your food needs to make sense to you. And that's why one of my pillars is education. Every client I have, I say, you don't have to become an expert. You don't have to study this forever. You better be able to regurgitate it back to me at a fifth grade level, right? But it needs to make sense. It needs to make sense for accountability.
Well, so the education and knowledge and learning, and so changing the mindset is much of what this journey is about. And we've been so ingrained with grass and grains, fruits and vegetables, salad, seeds, and nuts. And so the brain has to be retaught to think differently. Tell us a little bit about the things that you recommend and how to make those brain changes.
Yeah, the brain changes take time. And one of the reasons that it's so challenging is because food is so cultural. One of the reasons we love that crunch from a chip is because we grew up on it. You know, a lot of us did. I did, right? And so we have this psychological impact, right, of wonderfully wonderful experiences when eating. And we can't downplay that in this society, especially as we're making changes. A lot of people miss that, right? And so finding ways to provide that. I mean, for me, that's a seed oil free pork rind, right? It's a pickle sometimes, right? You know, it's little things that give you that crunch, give you that salt. But then it's accountability. I think because so much of what you do with this nutritional lifestyle change actually becomes very easy. There's a reason my program is 90 days because a lot of people don't need me after 90 days. Now, many do, and many choose to continue, especially very sick people. But I find that the accountability at the beginning is the most important. And for those who can't afford to hire a coach like myself, or for the and I'm working on a course that would be much more, you know, financially accessible to many. But for those who don't have access to that, find that in your environment. Find that in the people you do know, whether that's a spouse who's willing to do it with you or support you, or, and this is what I find, a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. They're like closeted carnivores when they're trying to heal. And so they don't want to talk to their friends. They think they're going to be judged. Everyone's going to ask them about this and that. And well, if you're not eating vegetables, you're going to die. And they kind of get overwhelmed by it. And I say, no, you have to lean into it. Lean into it and tell people, hey, I'm trying to achieve this health outcome. And this is what I'm doing now. And I just love it if you would support me in that, because it's tough at the beginning. And if you could just hold me accountable, that'd be wonderful. So I do find that accountability plays a big role at the start, but then it does get so easy, as you know.
Yeah, it's repetition
Hmm.
and keep it simple.
Hmm.
And that's why I think it's so important to keep on talking about the story and helping people change the mindset. And I think that's what carnivores really help do, maybe more so than keto. And because so many of us did better on keto, but they didn't quite heal. What is your thoughts on why carnivore seems to be better than the standard keto concepts?
Well, for starters with carnivores, it's a much stricter elimination protocol. I also find that when people try keto, first of all, a lot of people do it so very wrong at the beginning. They do not understand that they're going to be very salt deficient. They need to have a lot more salt, especially at the beginning, or they'll feel the keto flu. And then they're like, oh, I'm over this. It didn't work for me, right? But the other problem is keto still can be done dirty and gross, or it can be done very wholesome and right. You know, you could do keto and still be eating lots of processed food. You can get these keto bagels and all of these foods that are still ultra processed, right? So I find that keto, additionally, it doesn't nix cravings as quickly. I like to work in the reverse. I like to say we go carnivore. Then if your lifestyle desires it and you've healed, then maybe we backpedal into something a bit more flexible. I like to go that route because I think it's a cleaner route. It's a route that gets you in the proper place faster. But I think the craving piece is big. When people go like, hey, I can have 50 carbs a day on a low carb ketogenic diet, depending on what those are and when you're timing them, you can absolutely still be having cravings, and willpower is still an issue, right? So I find that the carnivore diet does a really wonderful job. And then the other piece of the puzzle, as I'm sure you know, is it does remove plant toxins. And we cannot underestimate plants, unfortunately, from oxalates to lectins to anti-nutrients. We do have a lot of interference there. And, a lot of people don't realize the power that can play, especially as you're healing. These are things people don't generally consider. And so I find that the carnivore diet takes away a lot of the guesswork very quickly. And then we can make decisions as people have healed. But I think keto just gives, it can be done absolutely. But often it needs a little bit more education to do it very well.
Got it. Got it. Your wife is pregnant, and that's
Yes, 24
congratulations.
weeks today. Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Number
Wow.
one.
And it's the very best in life. I have one beautiful and now one beautiful grandchild. So it's really amazing. Is she carnivore? How's she doing? And what are the positives of carnivore and pregnancy?
Yeah, she has been carnivore. Let's see, when she got pregnant, we've both been carnivore for over 6 years. So, just right there is a nice little N of one of carnivore for pregnancy. And so, yeah, and it's going to take away some of the influence of insulin when a lot of people are dealing with PCOS, and there are many factors there, but insulin resistance plays a big one. And so, yeah, so for Jamie, she found, and importantly, she feels fantastic. So my wife has had, I don't want to get ripped in the comments from mothers. Mothers, you are doing the most incredible thing on the planet. And I know that everybody has different experiences. So please, I support you in any of the ways that you went through your pregnancy. But it's been wonderful. Jamie, she had no morning sickness at all, not one
Wow.
day.
Mhm.
The only symptom was she was tired in the first trimester. I mean, you're growing a baby. And so I'd say first trimester, she started taking naps, which she never was a napper. And then by the second trimester, naps are gone. She's still hitting the gym. She's still teaching dance. So she's lives a very active lifestyle. Lots of muscle mass on that girl. I always say, honestly, I just try to keep up with my wife. I took a professional dancer and got her excited about lifting weights, and I created a monster. And so I'm just always trying to keep up. But yeah, to your point, she feels fantastic, and it's been a really exciting journey for her. And she's gaining what I would consider to be a really nice amount of weight. So right now, I'd say she's about 10, maybe 12 pounds above where she started. Baby bump is there, but it's really a bump. She's still, kind of pretty lean elsewhere. She feels great. I'm thrilled. She's very happy. Yeah, it's a blessing. We're very excited.
Nice, nice. That's pretty amazing. Is the plan to continue
Oh
through
yeah.
delivery,
Yep.
breastfeeding, and what are your plans on after breastfeeding and baby food?
Yeah, that'll be the challenge. I do think about that, as the kids are growing up and, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're, over at their friends' houses, they'll be exposed to these processed foods. It's going to happen. Breastfeeding for sure. If we're so lucky, and again, I'll report back when we get there that, latching is easy and flow is easy. The plan is to breastfeed, for quite a long time, and then yes, it's definitely going to be, fat forward. Very fat forward, very fat and protein forward, very animal based. I like to remind people that, let's say you have children right now and you want them to eat better, but you don't want them to go on a diet. All right. Well, just have sourdough bread go fermented, right? I mean, a fermented sourdough will take the lectins from 72,000 down to 12. I mean, the human body could probably process that, right? And so, there's lots of little tips that people can do where they can let their kids have some exposure to these foods, but we can do it in a healthier way. And it really does come down to the processing. We don't process any grains and any plants like we did ancestrally. And largely we did that ancestrally to remove toxins. And we don't do that anymore. So yeah, the plan is to continue to live our life and introduce our child to our lifestyle and make adjustments as we go. I'm going to be a new father, so it will be a big learning curve for me. And I'll take any and all advice, whether it's in the comments or from you. I really enjoy thinking about the future.
Enjoy the process and the moment every day. That's the most important thing. So, tell us a little bit about mojo as mitochondrial vitality and how you track or observe improvements in mitochondrial function through people's or their evolution and how they're doing through the process.
Yeah. Yeah. The mojo is, sort of just a fun term that I liked. I thought it flowed well with metabolic. You're coming up with a business name. But yeah, mojo, I really do think of it as your energy and your vitality. I think your birthright is your health. And so for me, yes, there are plenty of things that we can track. I don't do a lot of testing, as you know, I'm not a doctor, so I don't draw labs myself. That I outsource that. One of the benefits you would have would be to obviously be able to draw labs for your clients, which maybe I'll start going through you. But for me, the first thing I want to look at is insulin resistance. That's sort of where I start. The markers there are going to be fasted glucose, your HbA1c. We're going to be looking at your triglyceride level, your HDL cholesterol, your waist to height ratio, and your blood pressure. So I'd like to see all of those things improve, right? So that would be a very easy way that you could track it. And for your audience, if we want to unpack some of that, fasted glucose in the normal range. And again, fasted is critical. We do need to take fasted blood work. I recommend 12 to 14 hours. But yeah, we want to see that, 100 or below, maybe in the 80s to 90s. That's fine. Everyone's a little different. From a triglyceride perspective, lower is better. Okay. We want to see nice low triglycerides. HDL is the opposite, our high density lipoprotein. We want to see that up. And then for blood pressure, normal, and waist to height ratio, believe it or not, this tracks very well with metabolic syndrome.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that would just be, you want your waist at its largest point measured, and then divide that by your height in the same denomination. So if you're doing centimeters, we want to see that be under a 0.5, so a half. And those are things people can measure. But, I will tell you, the thing that I reference the most is how people feel. I really, I encourage people to be advocates for how they feel. But if they don't feel well, be an advocate for why you don't feel well, even if you're getting gaslit on your labs and everything looks great. But I do want people to focus on that. I want people to focus on how do they feel, because really I want you to feel like your health is in your hands. That's the goal at the end, right? Is that you feel in control of your health. Now, there are lots of extreme cases of things. There's lots of extenuating circumstances. But it is important. That's the goal. The goal is for you to feel like your health is in your hands.
Mm-hmm. And I think, how do you feel? And I've seen, heard the stories time and time and again, from standard to keto to carnivore, the feelings are greater, even though the labs don't always follow. And I agree with you. Measure less, move more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And labs do give a snapshot, right? And healing is not linear. I think that's important for people to understand. Healing does take time, and it does often go in waves. In fact, some people who are very sick might get worse before they get better. That does happen. And so I think going into your healing journey with a deep level of gratitude is really important. It's very, very critical to getting out the other side with a robust appreciation.
Well, let's talk about gratitude and how important mindset is, and how you incorporate that into your metabolic mojo.
Yeah, mindset's really important. And it's a skill, really. One thing I like to ask people, is how quickly are you triggered by anything in life, any stressor in life? You accidentally burn your steak, or you cooked it, you overcooked it, are you throwing the spatula, or are you like, oh man, that's a bummer, because it's a skill set that can be cultivated. It can be cultivated outside of the nutrition world. It's more of a lifestyle. And I find that engaging in gratitude, and by that I mean, don't just write down 3 things you're grateful for and be like, I did it for the day. I mean, keep going. Like, keep going until you can't think of anything else. And that can be very useful for people to start engaging with gratitude. And the more you do things like that, and you try to be more calm and collected when life goes awry, the more your eyes will be open to really the beauty of life. It's incredible. People are incredible. Nature is incredible. And so we start to, disassociate from all of these temporary pleasures. And you really do start to focus on a deeper level of the magnitude of certain things in life. And for me, one of the other things, I do very highly recommend social interaction. Humans are designed to be social creatures. And so I do think that having very good social circles is very, very important, not just from an accountability standpoint from the nutrition, but for our hormones as well. Our hormones are can be largely influenced. Women need to spend time around their girls, guys need to have time around their guys, men and women need to be together. Men need some alone time, go chop some wood, testosterone will go up. There's a lot of these things that are very, very important. But gratitude plays a major role. It plays a major role, and it's something you can cultivate.
I'd love to do a daily read, do some daily writing. Do you have any particular books that you recommend or practices that you recommend to help build those things?
Yeah, I would find the thing that you really enjoy that you can do daily. Now I was a huge reader. I'm a giant sci-fi fantasy fan. So that whole, like, you give me magic and dragons and swords, I'm in, right? That's not going to be the world where we're going to make, improvement in our life, but it is a very enjoyable thing for me, right? But you know what I really love? I love sitting in the sun and getting lots of sun exposure. That's a really calming time for me. It's really good for me. And so that is an avenue that I pursue that, it may not be meditation per se, but that's one of the things that I engage in every day. There are great books. There's so many, there's so many good books out there in this space. If you really want to go down a metabolic rabbit hole, Ben Bickman has a bunch, metabolic scientists, lots of really cool stuff there. There's lots of great books on ancestral nutrition. Dr. Sarah Myhill has some great books for people with chronic fatigue. I'm sure. Do you have a book?
I have
Do you have five?
books on daily inspiration, living your best life,
Yeah.
the fertile secret,
I'm going to have to get my hands on those. Those will be
keto
part of my reading.
carnivore, keto. So
Yeah.
I'm a voracious reader and audible books. I mean, I think that look at things like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, Think and Grow Rich, The Power of Positive Thinking, The Alchemist. I'm a big one on Neville Goddard. Because we need to instill part for me faith in God within all of us, and whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hindu, Buddhism, Taoism, or our ancient tribal belief systems. I think those are important things that we need to come back to.
Very
And,
much so.
and I do love Game of Thrones and Vikings and Gladiator 1 and 2,
Oh, yeah.
but ultimately the mindset of listening and reading audible books, and in the back of all my books there's a list of books that I recommend people to latch on to. And if you have I always ask people, hey, what's your favorite book in life? What book? Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, or James Allen. I think mine is The Master, and then Joseph Campbell's. Just again, but each of us has a book or something. I mean, I have the Bibles of the world. All the Bibles from all religions and all types of people. I think are really, really important for people to talk to. So.
Well, and on that note, on the faith note, well, there's so much to be said there. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on faith, right? I'm Irish Catholic. Faith means so much to me. It's a critical part of, it's also social. When you go to church, there's a social environment.
It's all social.
There's so much interesting history, even back to chanting. Certain ancestral music plays a big role in how we feel and how our gut microbiome responds. And so there's a lot to be said for faith, the least of which would be to think outside yourself and to think bigger and to become part of something that we are all a part of. We are all connected. I think that's a critical piece. The other thing that I think is interesting to nutrition and physiology is I always often I find myself, and if somebody isn't religious, you might not go through this problem.
Don't need to be.
But I often ask myself and look at physiology through the lens of does God make mistakes? Because so much of what we've learned in modern science is always trying to push the needle. It's being progressive. It's move, learn more. And, there was a wonderful study showing that roughly 50% of what we know now, I believe it's in 10 years, I could be wrong, will be false, right? I mean, so much of what we learn pursuing all the medical traditions are we've got new information, new data on this. We have a drug for that. Let's attenuate now. But we don't understand a lot of those ramifications. We can often, we don't always, but we can often miss the mark by trying to push the needle too fast. And I like to think back and go, your body's always trying to heal. It's always trying to do the best it can. If you're having some fatigue and you're not getting enough energy to the brain, your brain is saving itself by downplaying how much energy it can expend. And so the body is so much smarter than we are. And a lot of times all you have to do is get out of the way. And so I really like to think whenever a new, LP little a, great example. We don't have to go into it. It's a very nuanced topic. But is there a biological function, right? There is. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't attenuate it? Well, maybe we should, and that's worth looking into. But I think it's critical. I like to look back at the lens of, does God make mistakes? And are we maybe missing a critical biological or physiological function that we're overlooking for profit?
I think that it's our communal nature to be God believing in a higher power. And we create the stories that are powerful to bring our communities and peoples together, because religion is cultural, and the cultures and the communities that we brought together in the populations need it. And I think in some way we've been misguided and misdirected, and I find so many people that find spirituality again find the power of how the mindset really helps them heal. So much of this community is coming together in a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and we love to go to meetups, and again, whether you're in the plant world or the animal world, coming together in community helps us foster some ideas to help us heal more. And as a doc, carnivore is the thing that helped me more for quality. None of us know the quantity or how long. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know that answer. We have
Mm-hmm.
not proven that in any true diet, but I think I found that the carnivore for quality. But that's a I love the conversation. I think you're right. I imagine those microbes in the gut are moving to the beat and the drums and the dance of life, because
They very much so are.
all cells,
Sunlight,
all
yeah.
molecules move to sound.
There's a wonderful lady by the name of Mary Ruddick. Have you ever had the opportunity? I haven't had the opportunity to chat with her personally, but she'd be a really
Mary's
fun person.
awesome. Mary's
Yeah.
awesome. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
She's incredible, and she's really living out the life, and she takes a very unique approach to healing people that are very, very sick, very, very chronically fatigued. And she has some really important nuanced approaches, that she'll even say, if people, for example, if some people go on a carnivore or animal-based ketogenic diet, and then they're not clearing hormones, that's where maybe some plants can come in, like some cruciferous vegetables can come help improve, stage 2 and 3 of the liver. I mean, it's a great point, but does that mean that everybody needs to start there? No, she works with very nuanced cases, but she's brilliant. I would encourage everybody to listen to her for sure.
yeah, Mary Reddick is amazing. Love her stuff, and we'll be having her on also. And my good friend Scott Everson, we had lunch together, and with our friend Carrie stopped by and said hi. But it is there's so many nuances to this story that it isn't just a one size fits all, and each person has to find the right place for themselves on the journey. And it's about, you do one thing, you do another, it's a dance, and you're moving and through life stages.
Big
and
time.
and and my body works, it's different than it was at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Now that leading into my 70s, I'm still moving, I'm still active, but certainly things are different, and we know that as time moves on, that our bodies are going to be affected by all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all age, right? We're not designed to live forever. And I think that's on purpose.
And that's why it's a good, I always say, quality and activity and participation, and put yourself out there to make mistakes and fail. Then you grow and you learn, you create. We're here to create. I always say, make yourself the very best food and fertilizer for something else.
Yeah.
That's all it's about.
There we go. Well, and I like to, also throw, with quality, the term I like to throw out a lot as well is health span, right? No one can tell you what diet's going to make you live longer, but your health today is going to be a major indicator of your health tomorrow. How you feel today is going to be an indicator. So let's take somebody that is chronically unwell in their 50s. Maybe they worked their butt off for their retirement, but now they're riddled with disease in their 70s, riddled with bills. They can't get on the floor with their grandchildren. They're forced into relative isolation, right? I mean, you start to compound everything that would make you sicker and make you worse. And so I like to tell everybody, the hardest pitch on the planet is to convince a healthy person who feels great to live preventatively, right? That's tough. Most of us wait until we have to be proactive. I didn't get down this journey until I was broken and bedridden, right? A lot of people don't come to it until they have a problem. So maybe if someone is listening to this, this might be your encouragement to live preventatively. Get on this earlier, because then you might have a bigger buffer of flexibility later in life, which you can enjoy when you're retired. You can enjoy when you're with your grandkids. So health span is what we're after.
It's generational health, and the wealth of our lives is built in our health and our activity. Because I say the best way to make money is go to work every day, and likely no other animal says, "I can't wait to retire." And yet they say, like, you're going to be food for someone else, right? And so I always say this term retirement is dumb. How do you
I love it.
how do
Well,
you
I'll tell you, my dad is retired, and he does yard work is his favorite thing on the planet. It was his only hobby. I always joke with my dad. I'm like, Dad, the only hobby you have ever had is yard work. Now, he did have 4 sons, so he called it character building. So it did really get things done around the house. But yeah, even now in his retirement, he's always looking for projects. They're going to come out to Utah to see us. He and I are going to paint the baby room. We're going to get a wall up and all that fun stuff. And I've every single morning when my dad is here, I'm like, where'd he go? He's just went to Ace Hardware to find something to fix, right? So finding those things, even if you're retired professionally from an income perspective, that doesn't mean you're retired from life, right? You're
Well, that's
participating.
why I don't like the word retire. I always say re-inspired to keep doing
I
something,
like that.
and because the word retirement for so many people puts them on a couch watching TV, and yeah, they're going to mow the lawn here and there and do those sort of things, but really, like your dad, is to get up and go out and build something, make something. I mean, I think we're alive to continue until the good Lord said, "Hey, it's time. I need you in a different spot of life for sure."
Hmm. Absolutely.
What's your strategy for building confidence and resilience for your clients?
Results do speak volumes. I think that's important. If somebody is obese or diabetic and they see their blood sugar come down, or they start to lose weight, that it does speak volumes. I think results are important. They're very important. Now, not everyone gets them as fast as other people. Everyone's a little bit different in that category. But I do think results matter. I think it's important. And it's also good to reflect, because if you have someone who's quite sick, you might be missing something. And now you need to figure out what that may be to help move them forward. So results speak magnitude. I love just empowering people. I want people to feel empowered on this journey. When I work with people, I want them to get hyped. I want them to get excited. I want them to enjoy the process, enjoy the mystery of learning something new. And that's also why I really hammer the education piece, because people do get, when they make this change, a lot of people get very interested in this field. Not that they'll pursue it professionally, but they want to research it more. They want to learn a little bit more. They become more fascinated with why their body improved in this way, right? And so I do think that wonder and that curiosity really, really does continue to engender motivation.
Well, and I think the world today, like yourself out there, coaching for health and wellness, which is different than we've ever done before, and even for myself as a doc, just on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and whatever else, and just sharing ideas. You don't have to pay me a dime for this. And nowadays, it's there's so many people putting content out there to help. Now, do I sometimes call a coach, doc, a friend to get some more directive advice? I do, actually. I've talked to Dr. Ovadia. I've talked to my good friend Lisa Wiedemann, Angela Liro, talked to Dr. Boz. I'm always asking questions about even my numbers and my health and wellness and things like that, get some direction. So your brother said, "Hey, you should be a doc." But
Yeah,
you're an actor. You're acting like a doc today, which is the new world of healthcare. What are your thoughts?
yeah, it's changed a lot. I'd be remiss, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there, especially at the beginning, there was always that imposter syndrome, right? You've learned so much, you understand so much, you've helped so many people, and yet you still go, should I go back? Should I go get another degree? And the more that I've worked with people, the less I realize they care. They just want to get well. And I really would encourage people to have conversations with their doctors about nutrition. it is important to always remember the why. My why do I do this? Why do I I was an actor. No one taught me how to start a business, right? No one taught me how to make an LLC and that was all new to me and I'm still wildly learning in that arena.
So am I at 70 nearly, still learning.
Yeah, and so I'm always learning in that regard. But I think it's important for people to find a passion for it. And for me, the why is helping as many people as we can. And as much as there it helps when people want to work directly with me from an income perspective. But what I care about more is that maybe a video like this can reach way more people and can impact. I would do it for free if you told me tomorrow I had no finances, no financial requirement for life that's fine. I would do this every day for free. And that's important.
Well, money is the machine to reinvest into our cause and our purpose to help others. The profits are always paving the potential to help people. And
Yes.
this is a world of service. We are really all here. I don't care what your job of where your whatever you decide to call it, we're here to help others, and that's service. And to
Yeah.
me, the best calling in healthcare is a service industry that unfortunately has been mostly focused on profits
Mm.
and rather than people. We can't expect the government or anyone else to do the work. We must individually work. Again, we go to work in order to fuel our lives and the purpose of helping build our business to help others build their health and wellness.
100%. And nothing in my life has really reinforced how important service is than marriage. And so for me, finding my wife and having a really wonderful relationship and committing to each other for the rest of our lives and understanding that we're really in the service industry. We're in the service of each other. And that does absolutely transcend just the confines of our relationship. But it's a very powerful reminder for me every day of how we should be taking that to the world. And it's wonderful when it's done well, whether it's friends and family or the ability like we have here to connect with lots of people at large with these platforms. I really think that we are designed to serve, and I don't really think that if we avoid that, if we avoid this call to serve, I think we do suffer. We do individually.
I used to, well, before medical school, volunteered at a free clinic and really have see the cause of what we're doing is helping our brothers and sisters that are suffering. Healthcare costs are the number one reason for going bankrupt, and that's got to stop. And we've got to do something to make that better. And I think that teaching, as you're doing, is a cause to help more and more of our brothers and sisters. And so the challenge is the standard medical system we're working on making better. I'm not leaving standard medicine. I think there are many great things, great people, great intentions. Even the institutions overall, I think, believe in a greater cause, but we're misdirected in more money, and the system is failing. What are your thoughts for the future, and what's your path for your purpose in the future?
Well, my purpose is to continue to reach as many people as I can and to help as many people as I can. I mean, that really is. Well, actually, my first purpose is to be the best husband and father I can be. That comes first before anything else. But in that service, the next would absolutely be to help impact as many people as I can. I really want people to get well. I believe it. Like I said, it's their birthright to be well. And unfortunately, there's so much misinformation and misleading evidence and people and addiction, and we're all in this toxic soup where we are chronically distracted and chronically stressed and chronically exposing ourselves to poor food. But for many it can be very simple, and it's devastating when people don't have the information. And so I think it's important to get that out there. Whether they choose to move on it or move with it is their choice and their autonomy, but I think getting the information out there is critical, and I think it's a worthy life experience and life goal for me.
I always say the best things in life are hard, and we're born for hard. And so if you're failing, keep failing, keep doing, and the more you do, the more you're likely to succeed at something. And then you build passion. And you mentioned addiction. You don't ferment a ribeye steak to make beer.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You've
That's
created
great.
a dojo for metabolic transformation. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
dojo.
The dojo, it's funny, again, this is me just being silly and, coming up with ideas that are a little catchy. Yeah, the mojo is sort of just a reference for your vitality and your energy. And the dojo is a little bit more about, I believe if you actually Google the term, it's called the place of the way. The place of the way. And the reason I like that is because we want to get our energy and vitality back, but we need a place to do it. We need a mindset to do it. We need a framework to do it. And so it's more on the discipline side, the disciplinary side of this equation, right? Where the mojo is like, let's get back this end result. The dojo is the doing. It's the place of the doing. And so that's where we build education. It's where we build implementation and action. How do we do what we've learned? And then it's where accountability happens. That's where we connect and where we bond and where we help and motivate each other. So those are sort of the three pillars that I like to operate under is we have to understand the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Then how do we do what we do? And then do we have the accountability to get through the hard part?
Anything that I haven't asked that you say, hey, Kiltz, you should ask that. Or anything you wanted to ask Kiltz?
No, well, there's a million things. One of these days, let me know when the next meetup is. I'll be there. Or let's throw a meetup at here in Southern Utah someday. It's gorgeous all year round. Get a little wintry.
Yeah, I've been there.
Meetup.
I've been to St. George. Yeah, it's a great spot. Great spot.
Yeah. Well, you've asked wonderful, wonderful questions, and I'm sure I have a million questions for you. I have lots of fun, nuanced questions that I'm always puzzling out and always learning more about, and I'm sure we'll dive into those at a later date. But no, really, I just want to give you thanks. I think you are doing God's work, really, and I think that you are called to a life of service that I hope and I would imagine you feel very validated doing. And so if this is at least my moment to validate that, I would like to do so because I think it's really important what you're doing and the community that you're building and the information that you're providing and the opportunities for guys like me who are newer to this podcast world. I'm relatively brand new to starting even doing this. And the fact that you're even willing to have me on is remarkable. And I'm very grateful and is very gracious of you. So thank you.
And Matthew, would you share with everyone listening where they can find you?
Yeah. So the website, if you wanted to email me, you would just go to themetabolicmojo.com. There is a the in there. And then on Instagram, you could find me at @metabolicmojo. And I love connecting with people. So please do reach out. Please, find me, send me emails, ask me questions. It'd be a pleasure to chat with as many of you as I can. So, yeah.
Matt Helfer, the Metabolic Mojo, really a pleasure to have you on today. And to all those listening to Kiltz Carnivore Conversations, again, keto, paleo, carnivore, pescatarian, vegetarian, everyone's welcome. We really want to invite everyone to the table to talk about why faith, food, and fitness are critical to our lives. So God bless and keep sharing. See you soon. Take care.
Yep. You bet. Cheers.